Hi guys, welcome in. Welcome. Get yourselves comfortable. Have a paper towel, water cup, and your paints ready. I like to reuse some of my palettes, but I have black and white, bright red, bright yellow, phthalo blue. That's all we really need, and we can mix all the colors together today. We'll get started in just another minute, and you can watch this later on as usual. Okay, so just to go over some more of the supplies, we have our primary colors, black and white, like I said, and it's good to have a mixing palette just in case. I'm using a 10 by 10 canvas, but you can use a smaller size. You can use something bigger. And I'm going to show you the brushes that I am going to be using today. So first of all, I have this large round brush, which, you don't have to have. You can have something a little bit different. It doesn't have to be just like that. But what's really good is this large flat one. So any one of those two is great. And then for some of your medium brushes, I am using either a round or a flat. I like the flat one. Seems pretty good for a lot of texture. But I always keep on the side a number 2, a number 0 detail brush like these ones. All right. So you can pause this video whenever you need to, but let's get painting. So the first brush, you can use this large flat or the round. You're going to dip that in your water. And this is a fun painting because you can put more flower pots in here if you want to, maybe more boots to give it kind of like a family look. So to get all of the background going, we're going to be using a lot of grays and light colors. If it helps you, you might want to, you can draw out everything where you want it placed. So if you grab a pencil, you can draw out kind of just to get the exact size that you want. But I am going to just go for it with my large, let's use a flat one. I have my mixing palette. So I'm going to take a nice scoop, just a big scoop of some white. And then we're trying to keep it really light overall because a lot of the contrast and most of the color is right here where the boots and the flowers are. So everything behind and around it should be really, really light. You don't want it to clash with everything in the foreground. And I'm going to take just to start, a little dot of blue. If you take too much, it will, of course, it'll just get darker. Start off really light, and then we're going to take a little dot of black. So you're going to get a light gray blue. Okay, so this seems nice. Let's start with it. I'm going to just go right across. I think I'm going to have, and you can just test it out. It seems a little bit dark overall. I mean, it's not that dark, but I'm just going right across. I'm going to start doing short little lines. I want to make it look a bit clouded in general. So I'm just going to do short little lines. And this is a very impressionistic looking kind of style. So lots of short lines, and try to do little flicks at the same time. Use a bit of water. Fill the space a bit here. Then I'm going to wash this off. I didn't do all of it. I just randomly put it in for now. I left a bit of space down here in the corner untouched. I'm going to put in some lightness coming in from the side so you can see it's lighter on my right side. And then I'm going to drag in some darker purple, gray purple, from the left towards the right. So just wash this off, dab it on my napkin. And you can just mix from the same spot, really. You can take 2 touches of red, maybe, and 1 more little touch of blue. So you can get it a bit purpley. So you want to have more red than blue. Otherwise, it will just be very blue still. And I'm trying to go for a bit of purple. So again, let's just start a little bit of water. I'm going to take a bit more white because it got darker when I added more color to my paint. So it gets really dark when you don't balance it out with some more white. I'm just going to do back and forth little flicks. Try to get something going. See if you notice anything in your painting. If you want to do anything in particular. I'm going right over top of some of the gray. I'm not trying to blend it. I want to just leave it alone because later on, in just a short while, you can sort of see where some of the clouds are and forming, and you can enhance them a little bit better. And just a little bit off to the side. So I filled up most of the space here. You can see a little bit of movement forming. Then it's up to you. I'm going to leave this alone. You can wipe off the extra paint if you have too much, but I'm going to take a big scoop of white and just go from the bottom on my right side and drag some of this in. Don't over blend it. Get it a bit brighter coming in from the right. You can use a generous amount of white to do that. And then I've washed off that brush. Okay. So this has to just settle for a little bit. It doesn't have to be fully dry, just you can leave it a bit damp. That's fine, but let's take a little breather and go at the bottom here. This is going to be more where the reflection for your boots are going to be in the flower pot. So overall, I'm going to start with more of a light blue, add a couple streaks of dark, not dark, but some gray blue. Let's start with white and a dot of blue. You can always add 1 more dot of blue if you need it a bit darker. There, light blue. So let's go right across, use a bit of water again. Let it be a bit watery because the whole painting is supposed to be looking like water, and everything's very watery and kind of like a wash. Okay, so back and forth like this. And I have a good base coat for the bottom, and you can kind of tell where your sky ends and where your ground begins. So you can just go over this line with the thin side to get it more exact. You can bring down the line, or you can raise it up with some light blue or something like that. And if you need to, or if you want to, you can actually get your hair dryer. If you have one, and you can make it dry faster or wave it around. But after this, in just another minute, I'm going to put in some purple coming in. So a little bit darker purple, some more blue into the center here, and you can change it up to your liking. but I will be using a different brush for it. So you could use one of these two, the round or the flat. Quite honestly, both can work. Whatever works best for you, you can try out both and see what your preference is. I'll show you with this one. Round one's pretty easy, and you can decide from here. So this is where you can decide if you want to keep it simple in your background, if you want it to just be more of a gray with a hint of color, or if you want to do more of a clouded look like I've done up there. Lots of really quick strokes and a lot of layering, but no, I didn't really blend at all, actually, because I want more of the clouded look to show through. If I go back to roughly 2 parts red, 1 part blue, but you can see it's really, really dark. It's not what I want. So you only need a small amount of this with a scoop of white. So you just take a little scoop of white and just take a small amount of what I had here. You can always add more in. That's easy to do. Then take that little dot or two of black. So that's my gray purple. Just wiped off a little extra paint. Seemed like a bit too much. Then let's start from more of the top corner. So I'm just going to use more of the flat side. You can use the corner of your brush. You can use different angles. Just have this come in and just make some different shapes here. So you can see it's a little bit more unique looking. It's not a perfect shape. It's not very circular. It's got a little bit of a trailing, kind of like it's trailing away, very wispy on the end. I'm just seeing what comes out of it. So I'm going to do a little bit maybe off to the side, using more straight on at the tip of the brush. And you can just do more, some bigger ones. I'm going to add a touch more black. I feel like maybe I can go a bit darker over here. And I'm just mostly trying to fill up space. I just want to make it all look like very clouded. So there's not a lot of gaps between the clouds, as you can see overall. It just looks like a very drabby kind of day, but it's also comforting. For some reason, it's like a bit of storminess, but a little bit more calm and comforting at the same time because it has great colors. So again, with the tip of the brush, you're just going to do really, and just lots of overlap. I'm not trying to blend it out. I'm just trying to do quick little strokes. Yes, it picks up the color in the background, and I'm totally fine with that. It actually works out really nice in terms of transition from the clouds into the rest of the sky. And you can get a lot more happening at the bottom. And the more you go over it, as you can see, and the lighter you go, like the lighter you press, more it blends, and you can get very soft kind of darkness, but also very wispy, not as, they don't look as thick really. They look like they're kind of trailing away. See that? I just had some at the bottom here. So if you keep going over, say, the bottoms of your clouds or the edges, it gives it a softer look overall, which is nice to work with. So add as much as you want to. This is just purple for now. Then I wash this off. I'm going to add in a little bit of blue. And then the last thing I do is actually put white over top, because white is a great color just to put over top of pretty much anything. If you want to get rid of any spots, you can hide it. You can put more white clouds on top of other darker purpley clouds. You'll see. So all I have to do is take a similar color to what I've taken down here. which I just put a fingerprint there, but that's fine. And take some extra little dip of blue here. Nothing, not a lot, just a little bit more. Then let's see, I had some a little bit into the middle. Seems a bit dark. I'm just taking a bit more white. You can add this into some of your purple clouds. Sure, that seems nice. Little flicks once again. So you can put a little bit of purple back over top. I just played around with it. I didn't make it look like anything too specific. I just had fun with the colors. You can put some over top of your purple at the top. Just break up all of that purple, add a little bit different tones with the blue. And then I would just add white on top. But let's go back down here before we put the white over top. Give it a chance to dry for a minute. Back down here, you can put in some darker, just a little bit darker, blue-gray. So that's white with a little extra bit of blue, so it gets a bit darker. I don't want it too dark though. Kind of similar to what we've been using up here. And then a little dip of black. Seemed like a little bit too much. I'll just add a bit more white. This seems good. So let's test it out. Wipe off some extra paint. So what I'm doing is I'm flattening my brush as I pick it up with a bit of water, not too much water. And you can test it out in the middle, see if you like it. I'm going to test it out on the side. This seems nice. This seems like a good color, yes. So use the thin side, go back and forth. Let it be choppy. This is what we want. It's reflecting the gray sky, breaking up all of the same blue. And since it's still a bit wet, I think it blends a lot easier together. There. So just wash this off again. And I'll finish up with just plain white for some clouds into the sky. And then a couple, maybe some white streaks down here if you want to. But then we can start with our flower pot, putting our boots down. I would say for sure have it fully dry. Get a hair dryer. So I'm going to blow dry mine for a few seconds. It doesn't take very long. So take a nice little scoop of white here. Let's start, because up here I have some little bit of white going on. You can even take contaminated white. So I call this is your contaminated white stuff. That's white that's touching some other colors you've been using. You can take some of that and just let the color show through. It's still mostly white. And again, if you keep going over it, it actually starts to gray out a little bit, pick up the background color, but it still stays fairly light overall. And I'm just putting some in between some of my clouds that I had when I put the purple in. And I had a lot coming out over here. And this is just some gray blue to break up the white. So when you feel like you're done playing around with it, or if you want to go back to any other colors, I kept it very simple overall. I didn't try to overthink it. So try to embrace or, just accept what your interpretation of it, what comes out of it. It's probably awesome. And it's very impressionist style. It's what you feel like doing, what you're kind of feeling today. And yes, I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to get a blow dryer, have it set in, and then we'll start with our flowers and boots. So take your time, pause the video. You have lots of time and it's available on replay as usual. All right. So mine is dry. And I love the streaky look in here, just for more of a watery effect. I find it's kind of awesome. So let me just check. Yep, it's good. So if you're painting this later, if you want to wait, you can pencil this in when it's fully dry, where your boots are going to be. So let's just do that, and it will make more sense, just so you're not trying to wing it too much. I know it can be a little bit stressful in a way. And I'm just trying to find my pencil really quick. You can see how it's drawn out. Okay, so overall, you don't want too much empty space all around. Negative space is good, but not a whole lot. You don't want it to be this small. You want it to take up a lot more space. And starting with this flower pot, there's so many different types of flower pots and flowers even that you can put in. Let's go, so this is our horizon right here. Let's go a little bit off to the side. So from the center, we're going to go off to the side and put in the bottom. So this bottom has got a little bit of a roundness. You can see it's a slight curve because we want it to make it look like it's a bit rounded overall. And then you can bring this up a little bit wide, see, on each side. I'm not going to overdo it. It can actually be a bit more, it doesn't have to be too wide, but you can do it slightly out a bit instead of just straight up. So that's another idea. And you can see on mine, roughly, if you were to guess, it'd probably end right around here. So just above that horizon, I'm just going to go right across whenever you feel like you're happy. So your flowers are going to stick up quite a bit. If it's not enough, go up a little bit higher. You can just pencil it in. Go up a little bit higher. Just put a line going. You're not going to see anything up here, and you have a lot more space filled in. So that is the kind of basic outline for where flowers are going to sit. And then next to it, of course, the boots. You can go a bit higher. So I'm going to say going a bit higher is nice to see. You can go a little bit lower instead. I'm going to go probably around here. And when you're drying out your boots, let's start with the one that's closest to it. So I know that feet can be very complicated. Good thing we're not making feet. We're just making the shoe that fits it. So coming from the top, these rain boots, so they're very tall. We want it to have a little bit more coming out a bit wide, and then curling, just kind of curling down a little bit where it's supposed to bend, but not a whole ton. So just coming more straight down, but then there's a little bit of a curl right around where the foot's supposed to be coming out. And then it has nice roundness. You can start off with a little bit of roundness. You can always make it bigger. Let me just erase that right here. See how it comes out, and then just round it. Keep it more pointier. So it's not pointy in a sense that it's got like a triangle tip. It's just more narrow before it gets a little bit wider to the wider part of the foot overall and towards the back. So let's just bring this straight across. And we can, this is also a good way to map out having two of them sitting beside each other without it looking awkward. So since we can tell that around the back of the foot is going to be somewhere around here, we can start cutting it off. Okay, so you don't have to worry about making anything on the back. The other boot that's next to it, it's coming down. It's just a bit more coming straight down. So it's starting from this corner. Let's have it curve like this. So it's more looking at you instead of to the side. So hopefully this is making a lot of sense. Don't overdo this curve. You don't need to overdo it. Just going to erase some of these lines here. All right, so once you have this, it's more straight up, and I know it seems a bit funny, but it does come pretty straight up. It just has this small little indent. You can just pencil in this little indent. See where the top of the foot would be, and before it goes up into, you know, your ankle and all the way up the shin a little bit. So I'm going to have this come up, and it's a little bit wider because, right, our feet, and not our feet, but our legs get a little bit wider as it goes up. It starts off a little bit narrow and it goes a bit wider at the top. So that makes perfect sense. So a little bit more of a line coming up and a tiny bit wider towards the top. That's what we want. So you can make this a little bit bigger. If you find that it's a bit too small, you can make it a bit wider down here. And you can always go up taller if you want to fill up more space. So take your time penciling this in. You're not going to see the pencil marks, but I pressed hard so that obviously you can see it. And for when I paint it, I can still sort of see it as I'm painting it in. So I know that I have all the space down here to do reflection from the boots and reflection from my flowers. Put my pencil to the side. And the first thing that we want to put in, obviously, is our flower pot, because it's kind of slightly behind where our boots are. We're going to put in more of the base coat, get that filled in, get it kind of shadowed and all that stuff. We will also put in our base coat for our boots, because red is a tough color only in terms of you can't just take red and put it on. You're going to see your background through it. It's going to look really weird. It does start off looking like pink or orange, depending on what you want your color to first start with. You can do pink or orange, unless you have other plans. But the rule is, when you want to paint in your boots, always add white to the color so that you can get your base coat in. It has to fully dry. Then you can put the intended color on top so that it will cover your background. I'm going to switch to my number 2 brush. Just dip that in my water. And we're going to mix a brown. So if you happen to have a pre-mixed brown and you like the shortcut, just go to that and add some white to it. I'm going to take equal parts of yellow and red. Really depends on what kind of brown we're really going for, but that's what I'm going to start with. I'm not going to take too much black from here. So what I want to do is I want to take a little bit of black at a time until I'm happy with it, because I don't want to lose a lot of that orangey color that I'm trying to get into the flower pot. It kind of looks like one of those clay pots in terms of color. And it actually kind of looks a bit like a clay pot anyway. So you're going to take a nice scoop of your dirty white, is totally fine. And just see if you're happy with the color. If not, I'll show you how to change it. So adding a bit more white here. Don't want to go too dark at first. So if it's looking, you're like, I don't really like it. It probably just needs a bit more color. So a bit more yellow, for example, and just a little bit more red. You can add extra red if you want it to be slightly more pinkish in tone. Not pink in general, just slightly pink. It has a bit more of a warmth red to it. And just make sure you add a little bit more white as you add the color in. See there, it has an undertone of some red, looks slightly pink. And I want to outline all around. Yeah, this is a good color. I'm going to stick with it. At the top, doesn't really matter too much, but it's good to just be safe anyway. And you're going to fill it in rounded. So water, and what I mean by rounded is straight across, but slightly curved. It makes it look like it's wrapping around the pot. It's not just a, two-dimensional. You want that curve going through it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put all my brush strokes slightly curved. And just by doing that, it already looks a little bit more round in general, I feel. So from here, I want to also darken up the edges. You can see it's darker just around the edges, a little bit of trimming around, and just coming in from each side. So that makes it look like the lighter part's more into the center, whereas around the sides, it's just a little bit more shadowed. So it's the same type of thing. Next to it, you just take your equal parts, red and yellow, a little dip of black here, and you have your dark brown. So I'm just wiping off a little extra paint, take some water, but let's see how it looks, because it's still wet and this is fine, but we're just going to let it blend with it, go around the edges first, and just do a couple streaks coming in. Help shadow the sides a little. Just remember to keep it rounded. It's curving a bit. And this is mostly, I think, just my style in general. where I like the impressionist look. And definitely at the top it is more shadowed because of the flowers that are going to be laying over top. So I just put a good amount at the top. And I kind of go in between, let it blend together. So you don't need a whole ton of paint. This is my number 2 brush, so it shouldn't have too much paint on the brush overall when you're trying to just blend it out a little bit more. And I'll just get rid of some of these pencil marks on the side. Don't need it. Okay, so I'm just going to wash this off. If you need to, go back to that original color. You can brighten up the middle again. But I think that if you just take a little touch of white on your brush and you brighten up more into the middle here, starts making it look a bit more like a highlight into the center, and it's darker, it stays darker around the edges. So I'm just using my finger to help blend it a bit more together. Gets rid of the excess of all of these streaks that you see, gives it a bit more of a smoother, softer look. And once that is drying, we can put base coat for our boots because that has to dry as well. And I would just use the same brush. You just wash it off. And I said that you needed to start with a very light color overall. So light pink or like red, orange is fine. So if you just pull some red to the side, take a bit of yellow too if you don't want it to be pink too much. As long as it has a nice scoop of white, water, and it's going to look really weird at first. Fill it in with the groove, the groove of the whole boot, the direction it's going and flowing to. And this definitely covers the background really well. Even if you see a little bit, that's okay. You can always add a bit more white, but the second coat's going to be, I'm going to use, dark red, and it's going to cover everything as a second layer. Outlining here. A little bit of water, more paint again. Okay. So I would say do any second coats over here, touch up how you need to or whatever you need to do. If you go back to, I just added more yellow and red to it. I found that it just needed a bit more of this, kind of similar to this color here. If you want it to have a bit more of a warmer pink undertone, you can just add some on top. You can go over your outline again. So just adding some of this in. And I'm just taking my detailed brush again with my dark brown. A bit more of a solid line, kind of at the bottom. So a little bit less paint overall. Press really light. So you're starting at the bottom, just go upwards a little bit, press a little bit lighter. Off to the side, you can take, again, more paint and bring it in from the side for a bit more of a shadow because it's next to the boots. At the top makes sense too. So just blend it out. And just take, if you need to, any additional white to highlight in the center. So I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to take a blow dryer, let it dry. We're going to then, after that, we'll put all the flowers on top of our flower pot and actually put the flowers in too, so that when we work on the boots, all the flowers are done behind it. But when it's dry, you can smear in a little bit more white. I like to smear in a little bit more of a shiny white spot, so that's optional. Yeah, and someone's saying that it's fitting for this evening. Yes, it is raining here as well. All right, so that is dry. And in terms of greens, so everything about this painting is pretty muted in color except for the rain boots. And even the flowers are not overly distracting from the boots. They kind of have a little bit of a undertone of some grayness. I will be taking the same flat brush here, but you can also use a round. So if you kind of prefer the round for dabbing, you can. A sponge, some kind of like a corner of a brush, or not a sponge, using more of the corner, you can use that too. But overall, this one is good. Anything that's frayed is perfect. Let's make our green and take a big scoop of yellow and about half of that of blue. So I have some green, but I'm going to see this brown right here. I'm going to take a little bit of this brown, put that in. Or you can just take a little bit of black if you don't have any more brown. Now add brown to your liking. I am starting off a bit darker because I want to start off darker in the center and then make it a little bit brighter here and there for some highlights. You can take a little bit of like white or some light gray blue. Keeps it nice and gray overall to give it a bit of a gray green. Kind of looks olivey. So I'm just, the extra paint here, I'm just going to wipe off the extra paint a little. I don't need it to be overcoated. Let's just practice. So right at the top, in the center, it's going to be pretty dark here. And you can always add more blue and some yellow if you want it to pop out some of that green a little bit more. A close color to this can be Viridian green. It's a bit bluish in tone. It's kind of nice, and it's a bit gray. See, I'm just using the tip of the brush. You can use the corner as well. And you're really just going to sprout it up and out a little bit crazy. Also overlapping the flower pot, but I'm going to start like this. Like little touches. And that's why I said wipe off a little extra paint so that when you start doing a lot more, and you're lightly tapping with the corner, for example, it looks a bit more soft and spongy. I'm going to just dab right around this boot here. Off to the side. So you can think about, because behind it I have some leaves forming around, going right around my flower pot. You can do a little bit of a line here, like little dabs. Use your detailed brush, or you switch to something smaller if you want it to have smaller little dabs. Let's go a bit closer, you can see more of what's happening. Off the side here, balance it out a bit. I'm going to take a little bit more, and I'm going to start overlapping the clay pot. So it's, you know, kind of curling over, just overgrown. So I'm going to bring it down, and you're bringing it down. I'm mostly covering all of this top part here, but it can be like a string of pearls. You can just have a little hook coming down and just lightly tap as if you're trying to make a string of pearls. So just some ideas. It doesn't have to be perfect because I've never seen a perfect flower pot before. It grows how it wants. So you can do lots of filling in, a little bit, your call. So I feel like this is a healthy amount so far. On the edges, just use the corner of your brush, light little taps, get it a bit more spongy looking. And then I'll just wash this off for now. So this is a 10 by 10 canvas. Just washing that off. So what we want to do from here is just a tiny bit more highlight for sure, but starting with a bit of shadow. So it's actually a dark brown, if you remember the dark brown that we had. I like to touch up on that dark brown, and even the sides as well if it's needed. You'll see I put dark brown around all of these areas. You can see it's much darker under here. So it just has a bit of shadow that it's casting. So in terms of brushes, I would say maybe the number 2 brush again, if you have that leftover brown. Equal parts red and yellow, and then just like a touch or 2 of black. I'm just lightly dabbing through the tip of the brush, a little bit around next to the green or in between the green, off to the side. Just in between some of these green areas, give it a bit more shadow, especially from the top. And you can be a bit more light with it overall. So it's light little taps towards the bottom, but you're really getting a lot of the paint off at the top here. So hopefully that makes sense. And I did go over my green, so it has, it doesn't look like I worked around the green. It actually looks like it was there, kind of sitting behind it, and the green is still showing through because it's both pretty dark, works out. And with, you know, some dry brushing, I just maybe add in a little bit more on the sides, sure. So that was just leftover brown paint that I had. It wasn't too much, and I was just dry brushing it because it was running out of paint. There's really no moisture on it, but you could add a little bit of water to your brush to really darken up this side a little bit more. And this is white. So this is more in the front. And it just makes a bit more sense to take a little bit of white on your brush and some water. So I have white and water on here, just dabbing a little extra off so it's very lightly coated. And I rub it in. And if you put a little bit more without blending it, you get more of a shiny spot. So it looks like it's got some shine to it instead of, it really depends on the look you're going for. So if you want more shiny, you can add it. So this is just green again. Feel free to add some back in coming from the top, especially if you need to go over some of the brown. And after this, let's take, if you've been using this brush, let's take it again. Whatever you've been using, you should probably keep using it. We're going to put in some of our highlights. So highlights can be ranging from different colors. You don't need to just put a lighter version of your green and that's it. You can put more yellowy greens in there, lime greens if you want to. Let's start with a bit of white into our green. See, it's very light olive green now. So if that's not really, if you don't really like it, you can just change it up, add more yellow, for example, or more blue. But I am going to start with this, dab off the extra paint so that it's not heavily coated. Then lightly tap towards the top, just go right over the tops of or expand it outwards more. You can go a little bit bigger overall. Just go over this a few times. Get it nice and highlighted. Couple into, so the trick is couple into the front here too. So you want to definitely make it look like there's top parts of your leaves and stuff hitting the light into the center and following down some of these little, I'm calling it the string of pearls because it's the overgrown parts of the leaves, or maybe you've decided to do string of pearls. Now it looks like it has more dimension. It looks like you're highlighting all around your leaves and not just on the very top part of where you painted. And you know what's interesting is right here, what I've done happens to look a little bit like a fern in a way. So just the way that the leaves are kind of sitting and hanging out. But other things to do, like, for example, maybe just taking a random, not random, just any blue, plain blue. You can put in different colors and try to get different colors going through and not just the one shade. So that's just plain blue, and this is still wet. You could take plain blue and a little bit of yellow so it looks more blue-green. And I feel like it does help with the shadow overall. So you got a bit more bluey green in here. And personally, I like to just take a little bit of plain black and actually put this not on top of your highlight, but around it, maybe underneath on the opposite side of where you highlighted in this middle parts. So that's just a little bit of black, and it's still a bit damp, so that's fine, and it can blend a bit together as well. I want to show you one last green, and then I'll just leave it at that, so you can always add more. If you take more yellow to that lighter green, or just to that regular olive green, take more yellow, bit of white. You can actually just take, instead if you're starting fresh, a big scoop of yellow and just a little dot of blue and some white. You don't need to add black this time. You can get this neon, oh geez, I wasn't even showing you. You can get this light lime yellowy green. So again, that was a bit of a scoop of yellow with a dot of blue and some white, no black. Wipe off this extra paint, so I'm just dabbing it on the side. And you can get a quick couple dabs in here. Just some different color. There. I think that's seems good. Okay, I'm not going to overdo that. I almost don't want to put flowers on this, and I'm like, whoa, this actually looks good without the flowers. But I am going to add flowers because flowers are really nice. And I think it will make it look a bit more awesome too. So you're probably wondering, should it dry? Yes, technically it should dry, but I didn't do that in the original. In fact, while it was still damp, that's why my flowers are not overly bright, because it's mixing a bit with that green, so it has that undertone. So if you're daring like me, you're comfortable doing that, let's do that. Let's start with, in terms of brushes, you probably want to use your number 2 brush. And I'm using a good amount of paint on my brush. That's why they look so textured. So you want to have a fair amount of paint on the brush to get those nice textured popping out at you flowers. I'm going to take a scoop of red. Don't forget to use a bit of water and some dirty white. I don't mind it touching other colors. You can use straight up pink like this, but I did add in a dot of yellow to make it look coral. I just love coral. So a scoop of red, some white, give it a hot pink look, or you can go light pink. You can do both. And a dot or two of yellow. Mix that together. You can see my brush is heavily coated, so I'm going to take some water, have it nicely coated. And let's see, let's start like right around here. My technique was to give it a bit of a kind of like they're on the side sometimes. They're not all just open faced. So a little bit of a curve like this, and then maybe a couple little blobs up at the top. And it just looks like there's something happening. Okay, so a couple little petals sticking up at the top. So let's do it again, something on the side. So maybe a shorter one, a little curve off to the side, and then a couple little dabs coming up from the top. And it looks like it's hanging off on the side. So you can do some open face ones, like right here. Maybe I'll just put like 5 petals sticking out at me. And don't blend it in, just let it sit. Then I'm going to change up the color. I'm actually just going to take a scoop of red, mix that just with a small section of this color, as you can see. So it's mostly red, almost like a red rose color. And at the back here, I have like a little tiny one. You can add a touch of black to give it a dark red. See this? Nice dark red here. Just blobbing. Do a couple open-faced ones. You can overlap other ones, that's fine. Maybe off to the side. And I did add a couple orange ones. So wash that off. You don't have to wash it off too well. But if you're doing some more orange ones, just add more yellow to your coral. More yellow and a touch more dirty white. A little bit of that dirty white. Perfect. And, whatever you can fit. You just take a scoop of it. I don't mind some of the green showing through. Putting this pretty much right next to this or behind this flower. And I let the brush strokes just sit there, adds that texture. But if you want to add a little bit more layering, okay, so if you just take, for example, plain red, if I go on top of this coral, I can add in a couple little chunky paints, so just let it be thick and textured. A couple little streaks and lines in here to give it a bit more of a boost overall. That's just plain red. You can do that for almost all of them. And the orange ones you can do just yellow and some white. You can take a bit of yellow, and a little scoop of white, and you can highlight, add in some little couple dabs. And looks like you got something before I put in the black centers. You can take a step back, see how it's going, how it's looking. So the black centers, I'm going to take plain black on my detailed brush and just take a good chunk of it too. I'm just going to blot it just into the middles. Move it up here. So that's the flowers. And just make sure you get your final little touches in here. Any little extra with your detailed brush, any little dots you want to add on to the ends, maybe some dark green, a couple little squiggly lines to give it more of a leafy look, just for fun. And I've washed this off. And now we can focus on our boots. So we do need to put in more of a actual red color overall. So when we take our red, using the same detail brush, oops, took some blue by accident, do not want that. Let's just take a scoop of our red, put this in, and you can actually, into the mix, add a touch of yellow. It's not going to make it turn orange or anything, just if you take a little bit. It just, to me, it stops it from looking a bit too pink. Put this here. Start with the one boot, bring it up. And I'm just catching if there's any spots, for example. You can put a little bit of white again over on the side to cover some of your flowers. That's fine. And you just make sure I just start from the bottom, wrap it around to the top of this boot here. That's how I like to fill it in. Water, more of that paint. And same thing over here. So again, this is red with just a dot of yellow. There, those are definitely red now. So once again, that has to dry. You do not want to have to layer on top of wet paint for these boots. Something that we're going to be working with next is just red and some black. It's going to get darker. We're going to add some shadow, especially on this boot here. And of course, the really highlighted parts of the boot is going to come at the very end when we're finishing up the boot. This is going to shape it a lot better when we add black and some red mixed together. However, while that's drying, let's start all of our fun stuff into the water here. So the reflections going all the way around. I'm still using this brush. If you have leftover brown, for example, or any brown really, we can just mix on top of it yellow and red equal parts. It usually turns back to brown pretty fast. Dot of black if you need it. If you don't, just leave it like that. Or add a dot of black to get it slightly darker. Dip of water. A dip of water. Then just at the bottom, you can see it's a bit of a darker, or sorry, no, a different brown, not darker. I'm just going to do straight lines, streaking it outside of the flower pot going this way and on the bottom. And I want to keep it streaky overall. So I just, maybe I'll put a couple over here, break it up. I like the broken up lines. It's going to help make it look more watery. And you can just get a couple down at the bottom, for example. Different colors reflecting kind of all over the place in different areas, but mostly where it's brown, generally below it, it's more of a brownish tone. So I'll add a bit more black to this. Just a small portion of it. You don't need to mix the whole thing. And you can get some more darkness just below it. And a couple streaking down with it. So a couple of some of that dark brown using the black that we've added into it, just to surround some of the brown. You have some brown, you have some dark brown, all in the same kind of areas. And we can do the same with green. So pretty much everything we've been using, you can reflect. For green, generally the same green that you've been using. Yes, let's take some of that. So some of this green color here. I'm just mixing some of my dark and light green together. Why not? You can use your dark green overall. But I'm going to add some of this in between or around on top of some of the brown. I want to make it look like it's like a mesh of colors. It's all the colors are reflecting. Don't forget some little bit of water. A little bit of green off to the side. So mostly I put some of the green just on top of the brown. I didn't mix it. I just streaked it in, tried to leave it and let it sit there. Some off to the side too, just filling up a bit more space, not all the way to this side, but coming further down, giving it more height overall. And you can introduce a little bit of green, put a little bit over here next to the boots. It just gives it more movement into the water because, you know, the rain that's falling down when we finish it off, it's going to hit the water. It's going to give it that rippled effects, and it just makes it look like it's moving a bit more. So there's more of a broken up reflection overall. So I have some brown reflecting and some green. I'm not going to do the flowers just yet. I kind of did a special thing for the flowers later on. And I'll show you. You can see that it's not horizontal. It's actually vertical reflections. So that's different, but you can keep it horizontal if you prefer. Let's see. Yeah, these are pretty good. They're still a bit damp, which is okay. And I can add in some dark red. So using the same number 2 brush, let's mix some nice big scoop of red and just a dot of black at first, and you can darken it up as we go. Take a scoop of red, a little dot of black. That may have been a little bit more than a dot of black. Take another scoop of red here. So you can see it's just a dark red. I think this could be called Christmas red if anybody has a Christmas red, or even a naphthalene red, maybe a crimson red too. Different reds that can look similar to this. So starting with a bit of a dark red, first of all, we know that next to this boot, we want to darken up and start shadowing this one right here. So I'm starting at the top, as you can see. Trying to keep my strokes all up and down. And you can use your finger to blend it from the ankle area where it's about to bend into the actual foot onto the top of the foot. You can see I didn't add too much black at all. I'm going to go darker, but let's start off a little bit light. Start darkening up the bottom here. This is, so you know, this is the part where, because of the angle, you can see that at the base, so the sole of the boot, it's generally a bit darker. Right? It usually has a different pattern or something like that. The top stays a little bit brighter. It's going to stay a bit brighter and shinier. So it's going to darken up here, wrap it around, do a little bit at the top here. I just want to also start getting a bit of this coming from the top. And on this side, we'll just give it a little bit of a wrap around along the edge. And the creases, so it's got a couple of little creases up. This is supposed to be the top of the foot, but it has to look like it's kind of bending, right? So we're going to put a couple little streaks. Right around this area for now. And a little bit just on the sides to make it look like it's more indented next to where the ankle is. All right, now we're going to go darker. So I'm going to add another, maybe a dot or two of black. So it's definitely a couple shades darker. You'll see when I paint it on, because it's hard to see what it's really going to look like until you put it on. So this is my boot color on the one that's next to this one, so it's a bit more shadowed. And same with how it is sitting next to the flowers. It's a little bit more shadowed here. So if you want to switch to a number 0, you can. And just lightly get, with this really dark red, a little bit of an outline around the side of the boot down here, along the top a bit. And a little bit on the top here, and we'll blend that out. Okay, so this dark red, again, let's just put on the top, going across. Along the side. Okay, so as we get into this middle part, I have a couple little creases coming in, and the indents to wrap around the side of this boot and just bring it in around the ankle just a little to give it that bit of an indent. Yeah, just brought it in just a smidge. A bit on the other side as well. A couple little streaks. So you can add a few little streaks into this boot, going up and down. And don't be afraid of this dark red too much. It's kind of nice to have all of these different colors reflecting and going around the entire boot. Right here, this dark red, we have a little crease, so it looks like it's going into the top of the foot. A couple little streaks, just like right here, start to curl into the top of the foot. Just give it a bit more of a nice bend. And what we want to do is let it sit for the most part. I'm going to be actually adding plain black for more of a final outline with my number 0 brush. I'm just going to let it sit now because it's still very wet and I don't want to overdo it. Then we can put in some of the reflection into the water too. It's going to make it look a bit more grounded and sitting on top of the water. So let's start with not the darkest red, but the dark red that we did initially before we went even darker. I'm going to use this. Get right in between here. We want all of that filled in. And it shouldn't clash with anything else that's into your boots because into the background it looks a bit almost purpley. A couple of streaks, just go around the boot and then just pull out some of with a bit of water, pull out some of that color. And a couple little streaks coming down here. It makes it look all broken up. And they're all very level with the canvas as much as you can help it. But I do darken it with mostly black, actually. So if you take a little bit of black, just wrap it around in that little crease where it's going to be really dark. Wrap it around the bottom, gives it more shadow. So this is just plain black, going pretty much over top of a lot of the red. So it does look still a bit red, but it's super dark, shadowy looking red. And a couple little streaks towards the bottom again. So it's on top of some of the red, next to some of the red. And then after this, let it dry again. For those who are trying to put a little bit of a white reflection onto your clay pot, so I just dipped my finger in a little bit. You can get this more of a shiny spot in there. Just a little idea. So remember, they're always curved a tiny bit. So I do want to say, all of that white that's breaking it up too to make it look more watery and stuff, that's coming afterwards. Don't worry about it now. Just get in your reflection, and you can break up a lot of the lines by adding more light blue, first of all, and some white on top to give it all of that rippled effect from the rain hitting the ground. Okay. So I'm going to dry this off, and then we're going to take some plain black, give it more of an outline, a sharper look. Feel free to touch up on anything. So your really dark red, for example, if you need to do that anywhere. Or more shadow, for example, right next to this boot. Okay, so we're almost there. I'll take black after I dry this off. Okay, so that's more dry. With my detailed number 0, taking some black. And let's get more of a final outline just along, say, the top here. Around here as well. This one of them's a little bit, tiny bit taller than the other, but nothing too major. In terms of the way it's sitting, it's not just taller just to be taller. And a bit of some very light streaks. They don't have to be a perfect outline. We're not trying to make it look like a cartoon outline. But I have a little bit of more streaks just around the side here. A bit more shaping around the ankle. Pretty important. And a couple little lines coming in the crease. Just in that same area, just mimicking, just going on top of the same spots. And use a bit of water as you pick up more paint. Okay, creases coming up here. I want more of a solid outline between the two boots, so you can go outside of this boot and just give it a bit more extra shadow. Same with the bottom of this flower pot. It's kind of nice to see more of a defined, really dark line at the very bottom. Got a little bit here, so that's okay. I'll just put some brown back over top. Easy to work with, especially this style. There's a lot that you can interpret and do instead. Okay, oops, I don't know why I did that. I meant to take just a dark brown for this bottom. But I had black, just more at the very bottom here, which you can touch up on for some little reflection streaks. Just around that really dark corner in between and at the very bottom of the shoes and the flower pot. So I washed this off again. We got more streaks into our boots here. Another thing, I mean, it really depends on if you were a little bit shy with the streaks going into the boots. So this is not the darkest red, but it's a little bit dark red. If you have a lot of emptiness, just fill in some spots with some dark red, maybe next to some of the black. Try to give it a little bit more depth into it. I don't want too much of my actual red to show through. I want it to mostly be a little bit darker. And if I take, no, my number 2 brush, it's the one I want. A little bit of a highlight. So if you're trying to really desperately show some highlight through besides doing the white, you can do this. You can take some red, a little bit of yellow, and just a touch of white. So it's like this, it's when you add the yellow in, it gives it a kind of like an orangey reddish tone. And this can be streaked in a little bit onto more of the open areas, just a couple little streaks here. For example, coming in a bit rounded, coming in at the top of the shoe, a little bit of a couple dabs. And take some more of this, maybe right in the center here, a little bit up at the top of the foot there. I like to go towards the back part where it's more what looks like to be the top of the foot. And this is, so remember flower colors, if you have them left over. Remember the coral I started with, the red with a dot of yellow and a little scoop of white? Yeah, we're taking flower colors. This is how I reflect it. So a bit of water, kind of, you don't need too much paint, but let's see, I have a bunch going around. So close to the front, first of all, I have a couple little streaks. Just make sure you have a pretty fair amount of white, not overdone, but enough to cover over top of some of these lines here. A couple little streaks coming down. Makes it kind of look like it's bleeding. So just give it a bit of water. Do a couple dabs. And then just pull it down. Give it that bleeding look. There's a bit of a bleeding look from the flowers. And you can switch to your light orangey color too. Do the same thing, whatever colors you've been using. Just lightly press. So you get a couple blobs here to reflect it, and then just lightly pull down with a bit of water to make it look like it's bleeding a little bit all across this area. So you don't have to do that. You can do it more horizontal instead, like we've been doing before. That's up to you, whatever you think is best for you. And another technique too, if you need to break up anything, like you have a little bit too much with the reflection, just go back to your light gray blue or just light blue. I say gray blue is good. Just a very light version of it. You can, if I just lightly press some in here, you can break up some of these little flower reflections off to the sides. I am going to take a dot more of my black into my gray blue, just a little bit darker, and this you can give it more of a tiny bit more of a defined line into your background if needed. So from here, it's mostly just touching up to your liking. Obviously, we have to put a lot of, it's mostly white, I would say. Reflections around the boots and the flower pots, that's done really however much you want to do. If you want to do more colors, maybe you want to put a little bit more red overall, or some red with a dot of yellow for more of like an actual bright red color around it. You can add some of this in. This is more red and a dot of yellow. No black, no white. Just putting some in to reflect. or if you need to take more black and do it. I like to keep it right underneath the boots, give it that grounding look and more shadow. So let's put in the white streaks on our boots, make it look really shiny. It's awesome. It's just really awesome the way it looks. It's going to transform the whole look, I feel. That's just obviously plain white, so let's just take some plain white. You can change your water if you need to. And you don't need to take too much water with this. I have a pretty good amount. Just going to press and then swipe it and just basically leave it. So a little bit at the top, press, swipe. Okay, there's a good start. Then maybe a little bit less overall. You have to just commit. Just kind of press down and just go over it with your finger. See, I don't go to the very, very edge. I leave a little gap. And it creates the illusion that it's actually not as wide as it looks. Same within the middle. Press down. Let it smear a little bit. All right. At the top, I have a few little curls, little commas is what I'm calling it, close to the tip where the top of the foot is from before it gets down to the bottom, so that it looks like it has more of a lift. At the bottom, it's more of the sole of the boot and not, it's more hitting like the top of the toe, basically. This side, go within the outline. There's a little couple streaks to highlight just the tip of the boot there. And, you know, with the white, got all these little reflection spots. So just maybe some mimicking around the shape of it. A couple little dots gives it that extra shine. You can even go a couple little dots around some of the outline, short little lines, basically. Looks a bit more watery overall. A couple in between here will help bring out some of that creasing for sure. Okay, right here. And I have this big smear right in the middle where we kept it lighter overall of that highlight. And all of a sudden it looks like a rain boot. Very reflecting. Add a few little touches just on the sides with the white. Okay, over here, take a little bit of my white and just a couple close to the edge, mimicking the shape. Voila. So we're going to do some of this white reflecting into, not really reflecting, but just making it look like the rain's hitting the bottom and it's moving around. White again. And this is how I did it. I just randomly grabbed a spot, let's see, like right in front here. I'm going to do a soft, very, like an oval flat shape. See how it looks like it's very flat and it's kind of sitting on the bottom? It's very narrow. And you can do it again. Stuff like this. Slightly rounded. I'm going to go right over top. Make a little ripple. Maybe a couple streaks instead too. You can do a bit of both. Break up some of these flowery reflections we put some highlights. So let's see over here, a couple little lines, some flat oval shapes. So it starts off a bit flat and it just very narrow, kind of curls around. Taking a bit more dark green, I had a bit more down here. And this is just dark brown touching up on it. So that is the white. Just one last time, how this white that I've done, the shape of it looks. Let's see if I can just flip this upside down quick. It's with white paint, of course. I'm using black. So you're trying to just do it in a way that's more flat on the bottom, and use your water with it, and it just loops around really narrow like that. And it looks flatter overall. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with, if you want to use a ruler, you can, but with my raindrops. I would take either number 0 brush or number 2. You can use one of your flat brushes if you're comfortable with that. So if you have a really thin brush that's flat, you can use that for your rain. And I'm going to use a mixture of white and gray. So let's start with a bit of gray. So dot of black with a scoop of my white. Use that. Bit of water, flatten your brush, keep it nice and thin. And slightly, you don't have to have a big consistent line all the time. Some of them can end and stop shorter than other places. So you can just oops, I touched some red. That's okay. Just looks like it's still raining. We'll just do a couple little short streaks. Some goes further down because it's closer to you. Some are stopping a little further back, so you want to keep it a little bit different throughout. I'm going to take plain white this time. Do the same type of thing. You can avoid more of the boot area too. You don't have to do a whole ton over top just because you already have a lot of white there. So it's up to you. But a couple over top of everything is a good idea. And do whenever you feel like stopping, you can stop. And that's just with my flattest brush that I found. It wasn't that small, it just was really thin, is what it was. And it held a lot of paint, so it worked out really well. And with your detail brush, you can just take plain white and you can, for example, we'll just put like little dots to make it look like the rain is hitting some of the ground here. Okay. Little dots at the bottom, or. So if you have little dots making it look like it's hitting the bottom, you can add some of them. You can just put a little, almost like a check mark. Looks like it's splashing up a little bit. So I'm not saying you have to do that for every single one, just some of them is nice. So that should pretty much conclude it. We'd love to see results. If you want to head over to our Facebook page, you can post it under our group page, or you can post it underneath one of our calendars. Hopefully this was fun, enjoyable, relaxing, all that fun stuff. And it wasn't as hard as you thought. Maybe I'll see some of you guys again for another paint along. We have lots coming up on our website, artistpaletterm.com. You can see all the free ones and the Zoom ones we have. And subscribe to our channel. All right, thank you guys.